Hi, my name is Corey Knoll for class FCS 548, Adult Development and Aging. Our project I chose End of Life Decisions. I feel like this is a really important topic, mainly because it's one we are all going to have to deal with. There's really no getting out of it. It can be a really stressful time for families because we're trying to deal with our own mortality, and that's something really scary, I think, for everyone. Although this is a very personal and emotional time, there's also a lot of legal aspects. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time with what documents there are and some of the terminology. As though I don't think any of us should be giving out legal advice by any means, I do think it's important that we have just a working knowledge of what these documents are so we can converse with our clients and discuss things with them. The first of the documents is a living will. This records a person's wishes for medical treatment. That's kind of a catch-all for a lot of things. So if you're only going to have one document, that's kind of the one you want to have because you can put a lot of information in that one document. The durable power of attorney for healthcare. That designates a person to act as a healthcare proxy. A proxy can also be known as an advocate. And it's just someone who's going to make decisions for you, even when you can't, whether you're unconscious or you've reached a stage of dementia where you can't competently make decisions for yourself. And this person can be a family member or it can be a third party. Do not resuscitate order, also known as a DNR. It instructs healthcare professionals to not perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. This is really important that it's only cardiopulmonary resuscitation. That is your heart when they put the paddles on and shock you and restart your heart. A lot of people seem to think a DNR covers a lot of different things, but it is only that one procedure it stops. A will states how a person's asset will be and estate will be distributed. I think we're all kind of familiar with a will, but it's still important to kind of understand what they do because that's a source of strife for a lot of families, especially around this time. A durable power of attorney for finances. This designates a person to make financial decisions when the person no longer can. This can be the same person as the medical proxy or not. It can also be a third party as well. I think generally people choose the same person if it's someone they trust, but sometimes the person you trust with your medical decisions isn't that great with money, so you don't want them in charge of that. A living trust. This provides instructions about a person's estate and appoints someone, the trustee, to hold title and property and funds for the beneficiary. That's kind of a fancy way of saying after you've passed away and before your will's enacted, this kind of holds all of your assets. And usually the trustee is a bank. Sometimes another person is appointed, someone in the family, but there's a whole section of the bank and that's all they do. The physician's order for life-sustaining treatment, also known as a POLST. It's a form that's signed by the patient and by a physician, and then that is placed in the medical file. And this outlines what the patient wants in terms of medical treatment. This is a really important thing to get signed and to have in your and to have in the medical file and then to have a copy yourself. But this is basically an agreement between you and your doctor, saying that this is what I want done, this is not what I want done, these are my wishes of how I want to be treated. Because a doctor is going to perform pretty much everything they can to keep you alive, even if that's not your wish. But unless they've got documentation on them at the time, they don't want to risk malpractice. So this is a really important thing that you should discuss with your primary care physician. Even if you don't think you're anywhere near that, I think it's a good idea to have this discussion with your doctor. Comfortable with, because there are some specific things. The first of which is life-maintaining care. This encompasses treatments to prolong the life of the patient. So this doesn't matter if, with medical technology being where it is now, a lot of times they can keep your body alive long after your mind really doesn't want to be there anymore and isn't really functioning. So it's important to understand if they say life-maintaining care, that's where you're hooked up to tubes. They can do intravenous hydration and nutrition, which is a feeding tube, or kidney renal dialysis. That happens even if your mind's not functioning and your body's starting to shut down. And it can be other things like antibiotics. But it's good to know that there is a difference between that and the next one, which is palliative care. And palliative care is just pain and symptom relief without life-sustaining measures. And this is used in hospice, which is our next word. That's a form of palliative care where no life-saving measures are used. This can be something done within the home where someone comes and they check on you once a month or once a week, depending on your condition, and they kind of check on your medications and just see how you're doing. Or it can be done at a site where some people can go and spend their last days. Generally, you're not supposed to be on hospice care for more than 6 months, but some people do outlive that expectation. Temporary care in the form of a hospice volunteer coming into the home or a brief stay at a hospice care center in order to relieve the family from full-time care of the dying individual. So if somebody in your family is passed away or starting to pass away, it can be very consuming. And so it's good to know about respite care. And I think as mental health care providers, it's important that we know about what resources there are for that in our areas. That way we can pass the information along of some place to look or to refer them to. Because sometimes there's, legitimate work or other family obligations that they need, or sometimes people just need a break and just be able to step away out of the situation for a while. Substituted judgment is a process for families to make decisions when their loved one is no longer able to make decisions for themselves. It's just a process when they're no longer cognitively able to make decisions for themselves and how the family decides, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Right, so when is the best time to discuss end-of-life plans? Ideally, this should be an ongoing, open-ended conversation. It's kind of like when you talk to your kids about sex. Nobody wants to have the conversation. It's uncomfortable. You do it anyway, and it's never just one talk. You have to have this over and over again. And it's something that should be revisited by the family throughout the years. And you have to keep in mind that you need to be flexible, and people can change their minds as time goes on. Part of this is because of advancements in medical technology, or are changing in how we understand these medical procedures. And another part is we're really bad at guessing how we're going to feel once we're in a situation. It's great to have these hypotheticals and to have an idea, but until you're closer and until you're there, I think that a lot of things can change once you're in that situation. As I said, ideally this is something that's been discussed and there's paperwork in place already. However, it kind of becomes crunch time if a client appears to have 1 year or less to continue living. A client has made multiple trips to the emergency room for the same issue over the last year. Client has a specific life-ending diagnosis, or the client has an overall state of declining health without any specific diagnosis. And that can be when someone's just reached an age where their body's starting to shut down. These are, once we're in these situations, even if someone does have paperwork in place and somebody knows exactly what they want, I still think it's a good idea to revisit it at that time. So just because you talk about death, it doesn't mean you're going to die right now. That's a huge fear, and I think for a lot of us, I think that's a really hard thing to get past with clients. So there's some strategies to talking about this with clients. First is, make them understand talking or planning about the end does not mean you're going to die right now. And planning doesn't mean that you're giving up on life. It just means that you're planning. And it's, death. Nobody gets out alive. We're all going to die. And death is a normal part of the lifespan. And you have to plan for it, just to plan like you plan for any other stage of your life. And to not plan, I think, does a huge disservice to everyone involved. You want to encourage the family to plan together. I think that's a really good idea, that if there's a lot of people in the family, you talk to not just the one person who's terminally ill and say, okay, well, what do you want? Make them such a high, intense focus. You can make it more of a conversation, give and take. And I think that makes it a little more comfortable for everyone involved to say, and then it becomes more of a discussion. another thing to remember is that the grieving process starts before somebody dies, if we know it's coming. So that brings up a lot of issues. And I think if you're going to be doing any sort of therapy work with them, you have to attempt to address any family conflicts that can be resolved or that come up during this process. Some strategies for when a client is unable to make decisions for themselves anymore. So only 20% of individuals who lack decision-making capacity leave instructions. So that's a really small amount. That's like 1/5 of us are going to have all this paperwork filled out if they have the discussion. So family members are left making these decisions, and that can be really stressful and really hard and something you're going to have to work with. There's two different main ways of deciding what kind of care your loved one's going to get once they have reached a stage they can't make decisions for themselves. One is best decision judgment. The family member decides what's best for the client. And you're kind of just shooting from the hip and going from situation like, okay, what's best in this situation? What's best here? Substituted judgment is when a family approximates the patient's decisions as closely as possible using the patient's value system. That is kind of not based on what like my value is or your value, but okay, this person, what would they like? And you kind of review how have they lived their lives, what conversations have we had, what would they want? And using that system, families seem to experience less guilt when they use substituted judgment, because that way they feel like they're honoring their family member more than just kind of willy-nilly making decisions. So that would be my suggestion if you have a client who is in a situation like this, is really trying to examine the values of the person undergoing these procedures. I'm probably not going to play this YouTube video for you right now, but if you have time, I would highly recommend watching it. This lady is Judy McDonald Johnson, and she had two of her friends who she helped through the dying process, and she has a lot of really good information and a lot of really good things to say. Like, she suggests once you get all of this medical information, you can pile it in one spot and put it in a bright envelope where the paramedics will see it in your home, and then have a copy with your advocate. That way it streamlines your process if you do go to the hospital, if you're in the emergency room. She has a lot of other really great things to say, and I would really recommend taking the time to listen to her speak. And here are some tools that are available online. I think I'll start at the bottom here. This one is Judy McDonald Johnson's her website, and it has 5 different worksheets you can work off of, and you can just download those, and I think those would be great if you are working on making end-of-life decisions with a client. And it's kind of fill in the blank and asks questions, and it kind of helps you go through a process of how you would decide to pick an advocate and who you would pick. And those I think would be great to go through a client with so they can discuss it. Now, the 5 wishes, which are up at the top, that is the PDF that is found on the agingwithdignity.org. And this is a legally binding document in 47 states. I've put the link to the PDF up there, which just says sample. I'm not sure I would want to fill it out with a client because it is legally binding, but it goes over a lot of information where it's not just the medical decisions. But three of the wishes are solely based around how you want to be treated as a person as you're dying. Do you want music played? Would you like people to come in and out and talk to you? Do you want to be left alone? And it's just more about how you want the personal experience to be, and so you're not losing your personhood during the process of dying. But I definitely think that is worth pulling up and looking at, and recommending to clients, because they can fill it out themselves and get it notarized, and it does become a legally binding document. It is in New Mexico, it is not in Texas, but even if it's not a legal binding document in the state you happen to be working in, it gives people a lot of information about how you want to be treated and how you want your life to progress. listening to me, and hopefully this was informative for you.